Chelo, you are here today with me to talk a little bit about, well, a lot of different things, but I think we can especially touch upon something that is about the spectrum of abuse, of sexual abuse. You are a Spanish American journalist and documentary filmmaker. You've actually worked for a very long time about exposing stories of sexual exploitation and trafficking. So you really have some knowledge
Mhm.
there. And just recently, you have directed a feature documentary film, an award-winning film that's called Sand of Silence, and it touches on that subject, on the spectrum of sexual abuse, and kind of shows the whole, yeah, that spectrum, right, from something that seems almost innocent to really sexual torture, which is just horrific. Very touching film. I can only recommend it. Very, very hard to watch, but also extremely important. And I'm so happy to have you here today to talk about
Thank you. My
this.
pleasure. My pleasure, Luis.
Yeah.
It's a great opportunity to discuss with you and engage in a meaningful conversation because I know you also have approached this subject.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah,
looking
and the
forward to
whole the theme of these interviews that I'm doing, or these talks that I'm doing, is obviously related to the title of it, changing the narrative. And I really want to bring in women to do exactly that, change some of those stereotypical images that we have of women or certain situations, and kind of take control of the narrative. And I think there is a lot to say about that in when we talk about sexual abuse, for instance. So actually, I thought maybe I would start by sharing a little personal story anecdote from my own life.
sure.
Um, and you already know this story, and you commented on the story and said something to me at that point that really sort of touched me and impacted me, because I hadn't thought about it in that way at all. So we can go into that and talk about that afterwards. So what happened to me was that I was, as far as I remember, I was around 18, 19. I think I was probably 19. And I was approached by a retired photographer. So it was an older man, and it was just like in a mall, in a shopping mall. He came up to me and he said, "Oh, you have such a beautiful smile. You have, like, look so amazing." And I'm just a retired photographer. So I do sometimes photos as a hobby, my free time. And I was wondering if maybe you would come to my place and I could do a photo session of you, and I could take portraits of you, um, you know, completely free. You don't have to pay anything. I'm going to give you the photos afterwards. You can use them for Christmas presents for your family. And remember, this was before internet, right? So this was like before, well, not before internet, but it was before Facebook and Instagram and all this. So if somebody came up to you and said that, like a real photographer, as a young woman, you would be flattered. And I remember even thinking, oh, what a great idea. I can use these photos for Christmas presents. So I went there thinking that he was going to take portraits of me. And I never got to take any portraits, because what he did was, and I'm going to try to make a long story short, what he did was basically engage in conversations with me, conversations that would slowly get more and more sexual. So he would actually start asking me very personal questions and ask me about my relationship to my boyfriend, and I would kind of, tell him to back off and say, I don't think that's any of your business. And he would continue and continue, and then he would put some albums on the table, stacks of albums, like these old fashioned albums, with real photos in them. And he would ask me to look at them and say, I want you to see my work. I want you to see that I'm a great photographer, and go ahead and take a look. And I started flipping the pages, and I was struck by the nature of these photos. So they were all photos of young children. I would say between 4 to 10 years, that age range. As far as I remember, it was both girls and boys, but they were all extremely sexualized. So they were all in very sexual positions. They would sometimes not wear clothes at all, but their genitals would be covered either by the back of the chair or how they were placed, or so that you would never be completely they would never be completely exposed, but it was so clear what these photos were about. I remember especially a little girl wearing a red dress and have it pulled up so that you could see her red underwear, which to me was such a strange image of a little girl. I could imagine she was probably 6 years old. And to have her in this very sexy, like dressed up, and this color and the way that the photo was taken was really, it was horrible to watch. But I couldn't wrap my head around it in the moment because I didn't see anything naked. So perhaps I was the one being ridiculous, you know? And he kept saying to me that he had the signature from the parents, and the parents loved the photos. And I kept thinking, how can you love these photos as a parent? I wouldn't want to see my child in this position. And so from there, he took me around to different rooms and he showed me more photos, and he showed me a room that was completely full of photos, that were hanging on the wall from the floor to the ceiling. It was completely full of naked photos, but these were a little bit older girls, not, I would say, probably from the age of 15 to 18. And he would even come up behind me at some point and position himself behind me and grab my arm and kind of trying to hug me from behind and telling me, you see this position that the girl is in. And he was kind of trying to place me. And I remember like pushing him away and really feeling very upset and wasn't that I was scared, but I was angry with him, and not wanting to be touched by a stranger. The whole situation made me extremely uncomfortable, obviously. And the very last thing I'm going to explain from this is that he then took me to a room where he explained me and he showed me that he had underwear hanging. And he explained me that he would have the kids dancing around either naked or in underwear 3 to 4 hours in front of the video camera because it would calm them down before he took photos. And when I tell the story, people ask me, why did you not run? Why did you stay for so long with this man? Why did you accept all these stories that he told you? And I have to say that I think I was a little bit in shock. And I remember leaving the house and saying to him, no, I'm not interested in any portraits. And he was also pushing me, trying to, telling me that he wanted to do naked photos of me. And I said, excuse me, this was not at all what we had talked about. And I remember leaving and going down to the place where we're going to take the bus. And at that time, it dawned on me. It just came to me. And I thought, oh my God, I was in the house of a pedophile. And I called the police and I reported him. And the police told me that they knew him and that I wasn't the first person to come, but unfortunately, he was very much aware of the law. He knew exactly until which limits he could kind of push it and what he could tell me, what he could show me. So there wasn't really anything that would be enough for them to go and get a warrant and enter his house, but they had absolutely no doubts as to what this man was doing. And so I left the police like that, knowing that they knew who he was, what he did, and they couldn't do anything. And so I even get nervous when I talk because
of course
it's many years ago, but it's something that I, think about sometimes. And I remember I wrote down notes. And I guess it was when around when I went to the police, and I probably wanted to remember correctly everything that had happened. So I wrote down notes, and I have that note still, and I look at it sometimes and remember kind of what it was to be in the house. And I remember, so this is what I wanted to talk about, because when I told you this story, I said, well, I'm not a victim, like, because I wasn't sexually abused, so I'm not a victim, but this is just a story that really impacted me and, has been with me. And you said, no, Louisa, you are a victim. Remember that?
I remember that since you started telling the story, I could feel how, in a way, you were trying to excuse yourself, like you were trying to even ask that question and understand why you didn't bring this to the front of your consciousness and call it by its name, which is an aggression, is an invasion of your privacy, of your dignity, in a way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And obviously you were feeling it, you were sensing it. But it's very difficult for when you are in that situation, because I had the same experience in a different context.
Yeah.
When you are in a situation where is gray, the situation is not black and white, you cannot call it rape, you cannot call it sexual abuse. Maybe it's just sexual harassment, maybe it's just trespassing a line. It's very difficult, but we move so much, especially we women, we move so much in that gray area,
Yeah.
When I was a victim of abuse, also at 15, my abuser was someone who, and I think I'm gonna talk about it honestly.
Yeah.
My abuser was a priest. He was my confessor, and I was 15 and then 16 and 17. I also returned to him, and he wasn't an abuser that he also, I think he also must have known until what point to get with different people.
Yeah.
In my case, he didn't do sexual violence, but he did many inappropriate things, many touching breasts. But it wasn't like I'm touching your breast and look how excited I am. No, I'm touching your breast, and at the same time I'm preaching. Can you believe it?
Yeah.
I'm talking about God, but I'm touching your breast, and in front of other young girls, for example.
Yeah.
And then when we went to confession, and this was not at church, it was at a school where he was living and teaching, and he had an office. And when I went to that confession to him, we were sitting in a sofa, not very close, but the way he would penetrate me with his look.
Yeah.
He was also a psychologist. And the way he would play with me, the way he would try to seduce me, a young girl, 15, that you're looking for help, for counseling, and also for attention. That was very difficult to put a name to it.
Yeah.
But, this is a guy who was telling me, because, his bed was in the same room, separated by a curtain. I couldn't see the bed, but he was talking about his bed. Sometimes I'm in my bed and I'm masturbating, he would say. So what do you think about this and that? And I was like totally shocked. In those times, we didn't even talk about masturbation. I was like a total taboo. And that a priest was telling me this, it was really gross.
Yeah.
And yet I couldn't pinpoint it. I couldn't say this is unacceptable. Because at the same time, and this happens a lot with this type of perpetrators or abusers, at the same time, he was also seducing me, and he was also finding my weak points. As a young girl, like I would confess about, I don't know, going out with a boy or whatever, something that was not allowed in my home. And he would, or I remember at one point later on, I was exploring different spiritualities, something that in my house, Catholic house, would have been looked at like with certain, surprise, or wouldn't have been accepted. he would accept that. He says, oh, no, that's very good what you do. So he would accept certain aspects of what I was telling him, of my attitude, so that he could gain my confidence.
Yeah.
That way he could at the same time do whatever he wanted or talk about whatever he wanted and get excited. And then later on, it was even worse. He would invite me to go for a drink, not a drink, alcohol, but just like a soda or something.
Yeah.
And then he would try to kiss me and all those things. And it was like, in that age, it was like you only saw kisses on television. And then my mother would turn off the television in front of you, You're not supposed to see a kiss. Anyway, so yeah, so it's very difficult. That's why I felt like you were a victim, because he was abusing his power over a young girl.
Yeah.
And he brought you to his territory, and he was trying to involve you, wrap you up with his power or whatever, And thank you for being courageous and calling the police. That's a wonderful thing. So in a way,
yeah, actually, that's another thing I wanted
courageous.
to tell you, because I did call the police, and I also called a man afterwards, and I told him that I had reported him to the police, and we had a big argument, and that's where his very manipulative personality came out. I'm sort of, I guess, lucky in that way that I wasn't so easily scared away, and I guess realizing when I came home what had happened, I got angry with myself for not confronting him in the moment. And I had a need to confront him afterwards. So I called him up and I said, I know exactly what you're doing, and I think it's disgusting. And you should know that I have called the police and I'm going to report on you. And, first he was trying to be friendly and convincing me not to do it. And then I told him never, ever to contact me again. And I hung up. And then he called me up again with a completely different tone of voice, and trying to scare me and telling me that he had a reputation as a photographer and nobody was going to believe me and this and that. He was not a famous photographer at all. So, he was all talk and just trying to scare me away. What I then experienced at the police was that I went there and I told the whole story, and it wasn't easy because you're sitting in front of, again, a man you don't know. That's fine. But he was asking very direct questions, which I completely understand they have to. But we're talking about questions like, did you see any object inserted to vagina of the girl? Like this type of questions. Was there any anal, all these words that you just don't feel comfortable talking about it. But obviously, you're going to respond to it. And especially when we're talking about kids. And the police officer ended this by saying, and by the way, what were you even doing? Alone, woman, in the house of a stranger. So, I just got that served right at the end. And I felt about this big. I felt extremely embarrassed. I had no idea how to respond to him. I thought, oh my God, I'm so stupid. Embarrassed, really. And all I wanted to do was to do a good thing, to go and report on this man. And right at the end, I was being almost blamed, almost told, well, what were you doing anyways in that house? It's almost your own fault.
No, you weren't almost blamed. You were blamed.
Yeah.
Let's
so be
not
honest.
only the victims, the thing with the victims is that you don't only have to deal with your own guilt that you produce because you start doubting yourself. I went there because, on my free will, what I was doing there, I'm so stupid. You start blaming yourself and punishing yourself. But in this case, and often what happens is society immediately blames you. That's why many victims don't go to their parents, because they're going to blame them. Why were you wearing? Why were you doing at 2 a.m. in that deserted place? Why were you drinking? Why were, And so this society blame makes victims shut up and never report, not even confront it, and you cannot heal from it.
Yeah.
And the problem with not healing with it and then not speaking up is that, okay, you don't have the possibility to heal, but some people become perpetrators too. Some victims,
Yeah.
when they cannot process what happened to them, and in many cases, especially in the case of boys, when they don't have the opportunity, if they are victims and they don't have the opportunity to heal and to process what happened to them, then often they become perpetrators. Not always, but many times. And this is what creates this cycle of violence, which is something that I'm discovering now.
Yeah.
You know, after you were saying many years working with victims of sexual violence in all continents, you know, more than 3 decades almost now.
Yeah.
It's just like suddenly I'm starting to realize, why are we in this pandemic of sexual violence that never ends?
Yeah.
And this is the cycle in which we are, you know. There are many victims, and also many victims, men, much less, of course, a small percentage compared to the number of women that are victims of sexual violence, but it still is a big number, especially if we start looking at victims of clergy abuse, all kinds of clergy, you know, Catholic and Protestant and, you know, Hindu and Jewish, imams. I mean, it doesn't matter the religion. In all religions, this every time or in every place where there is like a hierarchy, you know, and there is people in position of power, there is a lot of abuse going on there in the schools and the gyms, as we are seeing, you know. So whenever children and young people are in the hands of these perpetrators, they're just, you know, they're exposed, you know. Many times I say that I talk a lot and I wrote a lot and I documented and I did films about sex slaves, you know, but the biggest sex slaves are children when they are being the victims of abuse, of sexual abuse, be it at home by a father or an uncle, usually, or being at school or at the gym, etc. So in trying to find out the root of this huge pandemic of sexual violence, I, through my film Sense of Silence, that addresses victims of sexual violence, as you say, the whole spectrum from child sexual abuse to domestic violence, rape, sexual trafficking and torture. I realized that there was a target public for my film that I had never thought of, which was men. Suddenly it resonated with men. I did the film for women, and all the women that participated with their stories in the film were doing it also for other women and for victims. And so to try to put an end to this violence. And we all are working, I mean, around the world, we all are making a huge effort to support victims, to try to help them heal, to try to prevent other people from becoming victims. But I realized that we have forgotten to look into men. What is happening with young boys? What is happening with young men and with all men who are perpetrators? Why are they perpetrators? What happened in their lives? At one point in their lives, they turn into an author of a sexual aggression. Maybe it was, as you know, pedophiles, maybe they start very young, but other people start when they are grown-ups. But many, we have to explore, why are they doing this and where are they coming from? Because they're all over the place. You put 2 in jail and you have 20 more in line waiting, you know. Exactly. And if there are not more in jail, it's because we are not speaking up and we're not reporting. But now that people are speaking out, now there is this culture of break the silence, you know, the Me Too movement, all this, that we have finally found the power to help each other to speak out. That we finally are trying to bring these conversations to the family reunions and Sunday brunches or whatever, you know. Okay, that's very good to speak out. And that's the first step, no? The first step. But it's not enough, because still there is a lot of sexual violence being perpetrated. So let's look at those perpetrators. Let's talk to them. I had the chance to show my film in prisons. And that was a revelation for me, because suddenly, instead of showing my film to a group of women or women and men, but just in the plain society, I was directly dealing with sexual aggressors. I was dealing with pedophiles. I was showing the film to sex traffickers, to people who were into child pornography, like your photographer. And what happened is that suddenly they were touched by the film, and they were telling me, I've never felt so much empathy with the victims like when watching your film. And
Wow.
also the fact that you are here with us and you're telling us your story and you're a victim too. It means a lot to us, because I feel I don't want to commit this anymore. And I promise. And they started writing me letters. People wanted to hug me, and I let them, because suddenly, well, the first thing that happened after, the film stopped, when I look at them, they have tears in their eyes. And suddenly I was like, oh my God, these people are human beings.
Yeah.
And they were asking me, do you see us as monsters? And that was really, really, it came to my heart, because of course, so many times we see them as monsters. We just want to jail them. We want to castrate them. And this is happening still in our 24th of November demonstrations, the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. We go there and so many women go with these big banners, castrate them and jail them. But that's not the solution.
No.
You know what I mean? There has to be a deeper solution, a solution that goes to the tissue of the human beings, because we are all part of that tissue of humanity. And that perpetrator that raped this person could have been your son or your brother or your father, you know what I mean? And so how are we going to understand them? By listening to them. And I had this chance, amazing chance. So it's the biggest gift that my work with this subject has given me, is to be able to listen to some of these perpetrators, many of them, listen to their stories, trying to not to judge them, which is very difficult. And of course, I don't want to just excuse them. Many of them were also victims of abuse, child abuse, rape, etc., etc. What happened with that wound that they have? They never acknowledged it. They never had the chance to acknowledge it, or they never wanted to acknowledge it. But that wound became an act of violence. It became an act of revenge. And now their revenge brings them to commit acts against other victims, other women or other boys too, And that was a big revelation, because I started listening to them, and I said, I really have to go deeper in here, because I know we cannot excuse them because they are also victims, but we can start trying to heal people like them, because they are already in prison, and maybe there are programs to try to make them understand what happened in their lives, so that when they come out of prison, which can be in a couple of years or 2 or 3, they're not a threat to society. But also, because they are human beings, they need a chance to recover their dignity, even though they have done horrible things. And also because by listening to them and helping them, we can also apply that, what we learn in that process, with young kids and not so young kids who are also victims, and that need to be healed, and that need to find peace inside of themselves, so that they don't become perpetrators, and that we help them become full-fledged human beings. So that has been a big present of this work.
No, I think it's so important what you're saying, because it's all about looking at how we can prevent things instead of how we can punish people, right? Because that's what we do right now. We punish people, and okay, that's fair enough, but we have to look at the root of the problem. We have to look at, and by looking at the root of the problem, we can find out how to prevent this problem, right? Well, which will probably always exist, but at least we can try and do something to minimize it and to help these people, like you said. And this is actually how you and I first met each other, because we've both been working on documentaries that were looking at pedophiles and abusers, but kind of looking at it from their side. and trying to figure out and see what is it that makes them that way, what is it, and also again, like trying to control the narrative of, when we think of a pedophile, we often think about a monster and we think about some terrible person, when actually there are pedophiles who are living in celibacy and who are completely aware of the damage they would do if they were to act upon their desires and touch a child. And they absolutely don't want to do that. They don't want to hurt any children. And so they live in abstinence and they have a control over their lives. But again, society is not really open to that and open to listening to them. So they keep it inside. And a lot of these pedophiles struggle with depressions and, of course, all the difficulties in how do I live a normal life knowing that my sexuality is not accepted and is also not something that I can actually act upon in life.
Actually, there is, well, as you know, there is a couple of organizations. One organization called Angel Bleu in Paris, run by Latifa Benari. Yeah. That's how we met too.
Yes.
And she runs this group, words groups, which she calls to these kind of workshops in which she invites pedophiles, usually abstinent pedophiles, and sometimes already pedophiles who have committed the act, but now have really decided never again, and also victims. And I was lucky enough to participate in 2 of her workshops. One was in February last year in Barcelona in person, just before the lockdown. And the other one was more recently virtual. Especially the first one was really, really amazing because when you are face to face with these people who have this tendency, this pedophile
and
tendency.
I'm sorry for interrupting. Just want to explain that these are not necessarily the person that has abused you. These are just pedophiles and victims that don't necessarily have anything to do with each other, and they're being put together in the same room to talk, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because in the end, the fact that what happened has influenced you as a victim. It doesn't matter that the person you're talking to is not your abuser, And for them also, it was, I remember there is always all kinds of people that come to these workshops too. There was one young guy who had started in the computer, just looking at pornography, etc., etc. And then immediately he was hooked up by child pornography because they just put them in your eyes, Society is playing a huge role in that too. It's not like these monsters appear sometimes. It's like society is feeding sexual violence in little kids. And so that's something that we have to look at ourselves and analyze what are we doing and what kind of rules are we following, or what can we do to prevent society to create these perpetrators and the role that society plays on that. But that's another thing. But with this young guy who was telling how he got into child pornography, but he didn't want to, but then he felt he was totally addicted. So he started therapy. And he said, well, I've never touched a child and I never want to touch a child, but I have this tendency and I don't know how to get out of it. So he was explaining his fight, his struggle. And believe me, during the whole time, it was like 4 hours or 5 hours, very long time. He had tears in his eyes, like a tear in his eye all the time. He was like so touched to have the chance to listen to victims and to have the chance to express what he's going through. But at the same time, there was another man there who was older, quite older, and who was unrepentant, who was trying to convince this young guy, there were 2 young guys there, he was trying to convince them that having a child or kissing a child, even if you don't have any relationship with him, is very good because children need love and they need to be kissed. And when he meant kiss, it's not kiss, it's kiss in the lips and touch and hug and touch inappropriately. I mean, it's like we're free to do that because we're just giving them love, you know what I mean? So there is so many misconceptions. But these groups are very good because you listen to these people that we always thought were monsters, and then you see a spark in them, and you see this willingness you see that they are in their own prison inside, you know what I mean? They are not in prison because they haven't committed an act, or at least they haven't been able to get to prison, like in the case of your photographer, because there are not enough proofs, they know how to manipulate the facts, etc., or the evidence. But if we can get to the point to bring these people to a point of vulnerability where they can express their vulnerability, where they can say, you know, I'm not doing this because I want to. I'm doing this, like some of the people in prison told me, you know, I'm a prisoner of this tendency. I can't control myself. And I know that I'm going to go out of this prison in 6 months, and I'm scared to death because I may not be able to control myself. So now there is programs in prisons where they are helping them to establish to have like a checklist, like a plan of action. Okay, if I get this tendency because I'm passing by a school and I see these kids, I'm going to call my wife, or I'm going to call my psychologist, or I'm going to call a friend who's going to immediately kind of derail me or distract. So this exists, and we have to acknowledge that this type of problems exist in society. So we have to deal with them as a whole. We have to have a holistic approach to them, and a holistic approach to these perpetrators, aggressors, so that by treating them as human beings, we can find their dignity, and we can ignite or reignite that flame of humanity in them. And for me, that gives me a lot of hope, because if we can do that, they will be able to stop doing their aggressions, you know, to stop acting on that, and maybe start a new life.
Yeah. I mean, the key here, what we're talking about, is that there is such a big taboo in our society around the whole thing of being pedophile, right? And sexual abuse. A taboo for the abuser and a taboo for the victim as well, because we're really not giving any of them a chance. You know, the abuser, because he doesn't want to be seen as a monster. He knows he can go to jail. He's most likely even embarrassed about his own actions. And the victim, because, well, look at what happened to me. And that was nothing compared to what a victim of rape has to go through, and then have to listen to, oh, why were you wearing a short skirt? Or why were you walking alone at 3 o'clock in the morning? Things like that. Why are we doing that? Why are we doing this victim blaming? When actually we should eliminate all these taboos and give people the freedom and the platform to speak up and be able to talk. And even pedophile people should have should be able to be comfortable speaking about their sexuality and telling people, even if it's friends or family. Like, I'm not saying they have to shout it from the rooftop, but just have the courage and be comfortable enough to at least address some family and friends about it, and that it's okay to go and seek a psychologist and get help, and be in groups like the one that you have experienced. I know also I know at least in Denmark there is Save the Children. They are obviously focused on helping children, but they are actually working towards having therapy groups for pedophiles as well, because they have realized that how do I help a child? Well, I help the pedophile not getting to the point of wanting to act on his desires. So that's the whole idea of prevention. And I know in Germany, they're also quite advanced in that way of thinking. And so it's really about, like Yeah, giving people the platform and being and allowing society, allowing people to speak up about those things, because we're gonna see them as humans, like you say.
Yeah.
And we're gonna
So in no, I was going to mention that this the prisons in Catalonia, where I have been showing my film and I've been interacting with sexual violence offenders. They're doing great programs to try to cut recidivism among them and try to re-educate them in what is to be a human being and not an aggressor.
Yeah.
And but when I was talking to them, something that I think is worth mentioning, because I think it's very important to understand. My film Sons of Silence deals with the issue of forgiveness and forgiveness on the part of the victim. And when they saw this segment of the film, immediately they raise their hands. What do you mean? I want to be forgiven. How can I do this? Because my victim doesn't want to talk to me. I cannot even send him a letter asking for forgiveness, etc. So I was telling them, well, when I talk about forgiveness, is the victim needs to forgive to move on, and he needs to put the weight, the stigma, the guilt on the lap of the author of the aggression, not on her, and she needs to free. Now, for the aggressor, you need to acknowledge the crime that you committed. You need to acknowledge that, and acknowledge means that you have to also repair. And so we started talking about reparation, and then what happened is that one of them came to me as I was leaving, and he said, well, one moment, but you talk about reparation, but don't you think that being here for 8 years is enough reparation? And I said, no. The reparation I'm talking about is the reparation that comes from your heart, the one that comes really from your guts, that from your understanding that now that you have done that, what are you going to do to rebuild the lives of the people that you have abused? Maybe you have really hurt them for life. These victims will carry that trauma for life and will impact their relationships, their relationship with their partners, with their kids, their job. They will have depressions, they will have sickness, many of them will really somatize the trauma and will have cancers, etc. So you have ruined their lives. How are you going to repair? Well, you cannot go to them and maybe repair physically because you're not even allowed to approach them, but you have to be able to come up with something that you can do in your life to start doing that reparation. And this is, being in prison is something very easy. The society has imposed on you. It was a sentence that came from outside. You didn't ask for it. You didn't want it. This is something that you have to want to do it. This is something that you have to do it. Because I'm not against to people spending time in prison for a crime. I mean, I totally support that. But as long as the prisons are not like horrible hells,
Yeah.
prisons need to be human too. As long as those prisons are an opportunity for people to reflect on their crimes and grow from them and try to repair. Like,
Yeah.
prison has to be that, like a platform for them to start repairing.
Yeah.
Many of them are doing this by writing, by studying, by helping other people. That's what they have to do. It has to be not a hell where you're going to be punished and you're going to suffer, but a place for you to reflect on what you have done as a human being and really work super hard.
Yeah.
Work from the inside.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like almost a sort of a school of education to educate yourself and learn about yourself as well. No, it should be a form of therapy and almost like deprogramming your brain. And I think you're absolutely right in saying that can only be done from a place of empathy and where other people see you as a human being.
Exactly.
I want to also just say that there are, of course, cases of psychopaths who cannot really be changed and unfortunately has something in their brain that's very, very hard to decode or reprogram. So these people are not exactly the cases that we're talking about now.
Yeah.
We're talking more about people who are,
Mm-hmm.
of course, human and might have some mental illnesses, but that most likely have something has happened in their life
Mm-hmm.
to
Yeah.
to take them to this place of becoming
Mm-hmm.
an abuser or acting like the way they've done. Right. Okay. This was very, very deep, and it's a tough subject. And I know for many people, it's kind of hard to wrap their head around this, because we do come from a place of, have you done something bad, you must be punished. And both of us absolutely agree that they should go to jail. But like you say, everyone is human and should have a chance to be able to, change and rebuild their lives. And I think also what you said in the beginning about the whole Me Too wave, I know a lot of men and even women are just maybe rejecting it a little bit, or taking a distance, or feeling that it's too much, or don't really see that it's helping anything. But it is actually a very, well, that's how I see it. It is a very big turning point for us. And it's something very good, not only for women, but for men as well, because it is showing that victims are allowed to speak up. And you're not only a victim if you have been raped, victim is also, like you said, sexual harassment, or someone who is just trying to take advantage of being more powerful than you, older than you. Like in my case, a grown adult man, older man, that was trying to, basically he was trying to get me to do naked photos with him, and he didn't manage to talk me into it, but this was definitely his goal. And I'm absolutely certain that he also got off of telling me about these things. I mean, that was sexual for him. To see me flipping through his albums of young children and see how I reacted, absolutely, that was something that he enjoyed. So yeah, you do feel like you are a victim of someone else, who's trying to impose something on you, and yeah, and I think that's a thing that the Me Too movement has brought us, a kind of given us a platform and saying it's okay to talk about these things. Let's talk about it all. Let's get it all out there.
Yeah, and also the Me Too movement has, I mean, we may not see it right now, but the girls that are growing up now, teenagers, etc., they have a different awareness about their body than before the Me Too movement. They actually, it's funny because Sons of Silence was released in 2016, and the Me Too movement started in 2017. So it's kind of a precursor.
Yeah.
Because I decided that I had to open myself and just say Me Too in the film, But what I wanted to say is that it's very important that Me Too has addressed, in my film too, they address the microaggressions. Because like yours was a microaggression, but well, not so micro. I think it was an important aggression, but microaggressions sometimes are, the little, you go, you're home, and then someone gives you, taps your butt, or tries to touch you inappropriately, or or makes a denigrating comment, makes like a very sexist joke that you have to live with because, oh yeah, it's okay. Well, he likes that kind of jokes. Now we have become less tolerant. And I think we have to have zero tolerance with microaggressions, zero tolerance with sexist sentences and jokes. No, I mean, excuse me, no. I mean, just respect. We have to create a culture of respect for our bodies, women and men too,
and men,
girls and boys. The body has to be respected, and our dignity, and our not only our body but our mind, our personality. And thank God the police now starts to be educated also in how to treat the victims when they come to report a case. So now I think there's been an evolution, and from the time you went to the police to
this was
nowadays,
almost 20 years ago.
Exactly.
It was
20 years ago.
ago.
There was no awareness, there was no education. So
No.
now this is changing, thank God.
Yeah.
And now we have police that are more and more educated and more sensible. And there are many police units that really assign women to rape cases, and that helps a lot.
Yeah.
To get this understanding that you need when you have been, raped. And of course, we've seen what has happened in Spain with the Wolfpack case, La Manada, and how society is very conservative, and the judges are still very conservative. There's been huge issues with judges just considering that a young girl or an 18-year-old girl that was raped by 5 big guys in their 20s and 30s, that was just a case of sexual abuse, not even rape. And that was another
drugged
step.
And filmed and
we have to go step by step, winning those little battles with the law too, so that rape is considered rape, and the perpetrators are taken to justice, and they can initiate a path of reparation,
Yeah, and that all goes back to what you were talking about before, because when I think about this very famous case that we have we had in Spain that you're referring to now, which was a group rape of a young girl, very brutal and just terrible. It goes back again to that what you were talking about before, because I think about those men and I almost want to vomit, and I feel just terrible inside, and I don't know what I would do if I had them in front of me. I think of them as monsters and horrible people. But again, why did they do that? Why do they have this? Why has society created men and young men and also older men who thinks that women are just a piece of meat that they can do with whatever they want, as if we were a different species, as if we didn't have feelings or brain, to feel the hurt and to feel the humiliation that they take us through. In this case, the girl that was raped. Why are they not feeling empathy for the girl? How are they just laughing? And they were afterwards, this was filmed, and they would share it in group chats, and it would be all a big joke to them, this rape of a girl. How do you get to that point where it's a joke to them? That's not something you're born with as a man. I don't believe these people to be monsters. I believe that there is something more behind.
I think we have created a monster of society, a monster of patriarchal society. This patriarchal structure allows for these things to happen. And even, they tap each other in the shoulders. Oh yeah, you got to rape her. Wow, good. Let's share it. Okay. But, because society still condones sexual abuse. Yeah. And you and I have talked about this. We have our big filmmakers, Roman Polanski, who just got a Goya by the Spanish Academy of Film. Yeah. And we have Woody Allen, who just got, all the prizes, awards in the world, what I mean? And there is a point, in the beginning, when I started reading about what was happening with Woody Allen, my first impression was, well, I love his films. He's such an artist. I think I'm going to go see this film. And my husband reminded me the other day that I went to see one of his films when I was in Los Angeles. And then I felt, I'm so stupid. I'm contributing to this patriarchate by supporting his films. I don't care how talented he is. No. If why we keep venerating talent that at the same time are sexual abusers and predators. Excuse me, no. This is where we have zero tolerance. You know what I mean? But yet we're taking... No, I was going to say, we take into prison anybody who is being accused of sexual violence. Okay, good. But what about these people who are leaders in our society, celebrities that we look up to? This is what did good. I think it was a good consequence of the Me Too movement. It started taking these celebrities and put them down. But still,
but there are
Woody
still,
Allen
like you
hasn't
say,
been,
yeah, exactly. There are still certain people that people are
untouchable.
too afraid. Yeah, they're too afraid to go there, and we even glorify them. We don't just ignore them. We glorify them. We give them nominations and awards and whatnot, and we, throw millions at them so they can make more films. And excuse me, but Woody Allen, not only the things that he has done actually to his child, but also normalizing very inappropriate behavior through his films. Manhattan, the plot of Manhattan is an older man dating a younger girl, a minor. I mean, what is this? So he's, this is a case of a man that most definitely is very aware of how to control the narrative, how he must normalize certain behavior. Just the other day, I actually was listening to another podcast that was talking about the case with Woody Allen and Mia Farrow. And that was referred to an interview where he had said many years ago, oh, nobody would be surprised if all of a sudden it came out that I had been in an orgy with 5 12-year-old girls, and he would laugh about it. And you say, a quote unquote normal person would not make that type of reference and laugh about it. If some guy wanted to make a joke about how he's been in an orgy with someone, or it wouldn't surprise anyone if I had been, doing a gangbang with the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders, but you would use a reference with at least, women or girls of age who were older, and not making references to 12-year-old girls. I mean, that is just absurd. And that is, I believe, a way of wanting to try and normalize his own behavior. Totally. And we completely fall for it, all of us. We laugh about it, we watch his films, and we think it's all okay. And then when you actually start looking into what he actually says and the actual plot of his films, you realize this. And I cannot watch his movies anymore. I can't. The whole thing about, I understand that separating the artist from the art, and that's a big question that a lot of people have a hard time answering. And I can understand part of it, because when I listen to music, I can't tell my brain, oh, you shouldn't like this music because it was made by Michael Jackson, or, Jimi Hendrix was a wife beater, so I shouldn't like his music. I can't. I listen to the music and my brain automatically says, this is great music. This was made by a genius. However, I can make a conscious choice and say, okay, I can listen to the music and enjoy it, but I'm not going to go out and buy his album. Or I'm not going to go to the cinema and buy a ticket to one of his films. Or, if I'm a filmmaker.
Or I'm not going to go listen to his music, because every time you listen to the music, it counts. They have royalties that go to the fund.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Yeah, I think we have to be tougher on that matter, because I do think it's important, and it's simply not fair that we throw some people in jail and others, because they make great films, they can just go on and make films. I'm not interested in seeing more films from Woody Allen.
No, like, for example, now I'm becoming a little bit strict with what I eat, in the sense, for example, I decided not to eat more fish because we're depleting the oceans, etc., etc. I'm not going to get into that. But if I make a conscious decision of not to buy fish, I want to be able to act like that with the rest of the things in my life. Okay, I'm going to make a conscious decision not to watch certain films made by sexual aggressors that are condoned by society, but not by me, by my ethics. And this is the type of actions that we can do. And we can encourage each other to do. Because otherwise, we're not going to put an end to this. If we are trying to make a lot of effort with the pedophiles and the people that are in prison and the sexual violence offenders, but we're letting Mr. Woody Allen and Mr. Roman Polanski be the kings and and be very venerated and glorified, as you said. I mean, that cannot be. We cannot accept, we cannot tolerate that.
No.
There has to be, we have to draw a line, because we have to defend the victims of these people, these perpetrators.
Exactly. I mean, really, imagine how you feel as the father or the mother of the child that was raped by Roman Polanski. Now seeing that he has his films nominated all over the world, and, you know, Woody Allen that keeps making films and people keep supporting him financially. And and at the same time, we choose to not believe well, she's a grown up now, but the child that said that her dad were sexually abusing her. That is a choice that society made, to believe Woody Allen over the kid. And I think that's absolutely horrific. It's terrible. And that has to stop. And I do believe that that's, again, one of the things that the Me Too movement has kind of, pushed a little bit in the way that we see now women and also children, because obviously this could also happen to a boy that speaks up, and we say, you know, it doesn't matter who that abuser is. It doesn't matter if it's a big Hollywood star. We have to look into it, and we have to understand that the person that was our idol at some point might actually be a terrible person that's done a heinous act. And we have to just accept that and investigate it in depth. And if it turns out that that's the truth, then that person should absolutely go to jail, serve his time, and hopefully get some help, like you said before, right? Because
exactly,
that's what we want in the end. But we also want to, of course, protect other children that might cross roads with this person and become a victim. Okay, Chelo. I think we're gonna wrap up the conversation here, because I know we can go on and on and on. We have so many topics we can discuss, but this has been really, really it's been great for me on a personal level also to share that story. And I'm very glad actually that I shared it with you the first time, and that you did point out to me that that I was a victim as well. Not because it doesn't really make any change now. Like I said, it's 20 years ago, and I have actually tried to find this man. I've tried to look him up, and I don't find him anywhere. Thinking back, I do think that he probably was around maybe in his 60s. So it's possible that this man is dead now, and I'm probably never gonna see him again. And that's okay too. But it was kind of a nice feeling to know that it's okay to feel bad about a thing like that, even if it wasn't a specific sexual abuse or rape. Yeah, so thank you for that, Chelo.
Thank you so much, Luis. It's been a pleasure.
Chelo, I want to just, if anybody would want to get in contact with you, or they want to see more information about your film, I really can't recommend it enough. Sands of Silence, which is the film that you have out now. I know you're also involved in many other projects. So are there maybe a website or social media that people can go to?
Well, they can go to my website, it's innerlens.com, or go to sandsofsilence.org. And on social media, on Twitter and Facebook, I'm at Sands of Silence.
Perfect.
So I welcome anyone to contact me. I love to interact with people, and I try to answer as much as I can to everyone.
That's great. Thank you so much, Chelo.
Okay.
I'll see you
soon.
Thank
you so much, Luis, for this chance.
You're welcome. Bye.